Senator Parker then took plaintiff down the hallway of her apartment to her bedroom, made a sexual comment, and put her face down on the bed, then raped her. The new lawsuit was filed under the Adult Survivors Act, which lifted the statute of limitations for 1 year to allow victims of sexual abuse to file suit.
And that very law that Senator Parker supported so vociferously, making sure that the statute of limitations is extended so Trump can face justice, is now being used against him. A state politician in the state of New York is under fire right now with rape accusations. He's from Brooklyn, and the story was covered by the local news station. They're here. Take a look at the report, and then we're going to break it down for you.
In 2004, a 31-year-old woman named Olga Jean-Baptiste was helping Brooklyn State Senator Kevin Parker arrange relief for flood victims in Haiti. She now says after she returned from her trip there, Parker visited her apartment to pick up some photos and discuss the trip. According to a lawsuit filed Friday, she then stood up to say goodbye when Senator Parker held on to both of her wrists with his hands. Plaintiff was frozen in fear and was unable to cry out. Senator Parker then took plaintiff down the hallway of her apartment to her bedroom, made a sexual comment, and put her face down on the bed, then raped her. Governor Hochul called the allegations deeply disturbing.
It is shocking, absolutely shocking. And that's all I'll say. It's shocking.
Parker.
Just to jump in here, there's more to this story, but I don't think there's any truth to the rumor that after Kathy Hochul's comment there, they edited it out. I don't think she said, and it's even more shocking that Senator Parker, because he's a black man, has no idea what the word computer is. I don't think that's what happened. He could have said that. She could have said that. She's said it before. But anyway, all right, back to the report.
Parker has a long history of run-ins with the law, including charges for assaulting a traffic agent in 2005. In 2009, he was arrested and later found guilty on misdemeanor charges after assaulting a New York Post photographer. Here's what he told New York One after the verdict.
You have an anger problem that some people can maintain?
I won my election 76%. I think that my constituents understand my passion.
The new lawsuit was filed under the Adult Survivors Act, which lifted the statute of limitations for 1 year to allow victims of sexual abuse to file suit, regardless of when the abuse occurred.
I'm glad I could sign the Adult Survivor Act that created the window for so many people who have cases like this to be able to come forward. So we made that happen.
All right. Now, let's talk through this story. First of all, he seems like a real winner, right? All of these run-ins with the laws and the vivid details that this the plaintiff in this case has delivered. I mean, she can deliver to you the day, the year, the month, the circumstances. She remembers vividly what they were talking about. She remembers vividly what he did, grabbing her by the wrist, forcing her down to the bedroom, forcing her onto the, I don't want to get into the details. You just heard it. It's gross. But the fact that the victim in this case, the plaintiff specifically, can give you so many vivid details. It's pretty amazing considering this allegedly took place in 2004. I mean, that's 20 years ago, right? Now, you may be thinking to yourself, especially if you've got some good understanding of the law around this country, that 20 years later, that's really hard. It's hard to have a fair trial 20 years later. No physical evidence certainly exists of this occurrence. It's really just going to be a he said, she said situation. Who do you believe on the witness stand, and whether there's any corroborating testimony, really? Because 20 years later, there's not going to be any evidence that you can use, physical evidence certainly, to be able to prove that this happened. And 20 years later, it's hard to really completely believe the testimony of witnesses, because 20 years later, you can easily call into question how good their memories are, right? So here's the thing. This is why we have a statute of limitations on crimes like this, right? Because it's just really hard to ensure that someone will have a fair trial with a situation like this, no matter how vivid the memory of the victim is and how detailed the account is, because it's just hard for someone to defend themselves, right? 20 years later, it's nearly impossible. And that's why we have a statute of limitations on this case, right? But see, as you just heard at the end of that report, there is a new law in the state of New York that extends the statute of limitations on cases like this, on sexual assault. And the reason that this law has been extended in such a way to allow new lawsuits for alleged sexual assaults that have happened decades ago, the reason that they extended that statute of limitations was to accommodate one claim, the claim brought by E. Jean Carroll against Donald Trump. You see, that alleged sexual assault took place 30 years ago. And in any normal world, and certainly in the United States of America over the course of our last 240 years, you could never bring a case, criminal or civil, 30 years later and try it in court. But the state of New York changed that law to accommodate that one allegation, that one charge, so that the E. Jean Carroll case could go to court. Now, unlike the victim in this case, E. Jean Carroll couldn't even nail down the exact year that the incident occurred, let alone the month and the day, let alone the details as vividly and clearly as the alleged victim of State Senator Kevin Parker could in her complaint. But that doesn't matter. They needed to bring those charges forward, and they sure did against Donald Trump. And she won. E. Jean Carroll won her case. So there you go. Justice served, right? Oh, there's one other thing about the extension of that law in New York that allowed Donald Trump to have to deal with that case against E. Jean Carroll, and now Senator Parker has to deal with here. You see, Senator Kevin Parker, the man who's now standing accused of a crime that supposedly took place 20 years ago, he voted for that law that extended the statute of limitations. He supported it with a full voice, boisterously. He was animated and excited about supporting that law because we're going to get Trump. And so he was all in. Absolutely. We've got to change the statute of limitations. There are victims out there that need to be heard. So let's hear the victims. So here he is as a state senator casting his vote for his party and his people, making sure that the statute of limitations is extended so Trump can face justice. And that very law that Senator Parker supported so vociferously is now being used against him. Oh, and there's one other thing that you need to know about that law and about Senator Parker and these charges that have now brought against him. He believes that the state law that he supported and he voted on and he let happen that was used against Donald Trump, well, now that it's being used against him, he believes that that law is unconstitutional. I wish I were making this up. He helped vote for the law and bring the law onto the books so that Trump could get prosecuted. All the while, people, including Donald Trump, are saying, this doesn't seem very constitutional. And now this guy is getting bitten the by that exact same law under the exact same conditions. And he now says, yeah, that law, the law I supported, the law I voted for so we could get Trump, that's way unconstitutional. It's a beautiful thing. Now, as much as I love to see him foisted on his own petard, that's right, I said petard. And as much as I love the irony of all of that, and as much as I hope that he has to feel pain, very real pain in the courtroom because of what he did to the state of New York judicial system for the sole purposes of his political vindication against Donald Trump. Fact of the matter is, he's right. It is unconstitutional. And it's wrong that somebody has to try to defend themselves from something like this 20 years ago. He may well have done what he's accused of doing. But the fact of the matter is, we do have a system of laws in place in this country. We do have a statute of limitations for very real purposes. The difference here is that as much as I don't like this guy, I believe that he shouldn't have to face an unconstitutional process. I just wonder if he can now bring himself to say the same thing about Donald Trump. And the answer, of course, is no, because as unconstitutional as that process was, it worked, didn't it? And we got Trump, didn't we? And that's all that matters when you live in a totalitarian state.